Investigative journalism. At its absolute best, it's this incredible force meant to expose corruption and hold the powerful accountable. But like any really powerful tool, it's a double-edged sword. It can be used for good, or it can cause a whole lot of harm. So, let's get right into it.
And this really gets to the heart of what we're talking about today. Is journalism a check on power, or can it sometimes become a weapon of power? That's the central tension, the whole double-edged sword idea we're here to unpack.
Okay, so, part 1, the Watchdog's promise. To really dig into that big question, you've got to go back to the beginning. Back to where this whole idea of investigative reporting was born, right in the middle of this massive, chaotic era of industrial and political change.
So say hello to the original watchdogs, the muckrakers. And look, this wasn't about sensationalism or just getting shocking headlines. No, these folks were pioneers. They invented a whole new style of journalism built on deep, careful, fact-based research, all to take on these massive, unchecked monopolies and crooked politicians.
And let me tell you, their work had real teeth. This wasn't just some article that got people talking for a day. We're talking about journalism that created real society-level change. I mean, their reporting directly influenced new laws and even led to the breakup of one of the most powerful corporations on Earth.
And this is what's so incredible, the sheer scale of what they were doing. Think about it. Tarbell spent 5 years, buried in corporate records just to expose how Standard Oil built its empire. And that's huge because it created this direct line. You could literally trace it from a piece of journalism to massive systemic reform. That set the stage for everything that followed.
All right, on to part 2, triumphs that changed history. So this idea of journalism as a force for good, a real check on power, well, it really hit its absolute peak in the 20th century. We're talking about investigations that didn't just report on history, they actually rewrote it.
And of course, you know the one I'm talking about, Watergate, the classic example. It was just this relentless, methodical reporting from Woodward and Bernstein at the Washington Post. They just kept pulling on this one little thread, and it unraveled a cover-up that went right to the top, all the way to the Oval Office. A U.S. president had to resign because of it. Just incredible.
But, this power wasn't just about taking on the government. Fast forward a few decades, and you have the Boston Globe's Spotlight team. They took on a completely different but just as powerful institution and exposed a conspiracy of silence that had protected abusers for generations. That story sparked a global reckoning.
And that brings us to the modern era, which is just a whole different ballgame. Look at this number, 11.5 million documents. That's how many documents were in the Panama Papers leak. The scale is just mind-blowing. You can't have 1 or 2 reporters on this. It took hundreds of journalists all over the world working together just to sift through it all. But here's the thing. The impact was just as huge. The Panama Papers investigation, it led to governments getting back over $1 billion in taxes. It started investigations that literally brought down world leaders. I mean, if you want to see the watchdog ideal in action, that's it right there.
Okay, part 3, failures that eroded trust. But remember, we called this a double-edged sword for a reason, because all that power to expose, well, it comes with a huge responsibility. And when you get it wrong, the consequences can be absolutely devastating, not just for the people in the story, but for the credibility of journalism itself.
So yeah, what does happen when the watchdog gets it wrong? This is where things get really messy. What happens when that hunger to expose a big story becomes more important than the hard, slow work of actually proving it? That's when things can go really, really sideways.
So let's look at 2 really big examples that show what this catastrophic fallout looks like. In one case, you had an entire story built on just one single source that was never properly checked. In the other, you had this massive rush to judgment where a really compelling narrative took over and people amplified false accusations while ignoring evidence that didn't fit.
And here's the key takeaway, right? These aren't just simple mistakes we're talking about. They point to this fundamental tension. The failures often happen when the story, the compelling narrative, becomes more important than the rigorous, sometimes inconvenient work of verification.
All right, section 4, the censorship battlefield. So this all brings us right up to today, where the fight has totally changed. It's not just about digging up the truth anymore. Now, it's a battle over who gets to control the information we see in the first place, especially online.
And that's the modern battlefield right there. I mean, social media is basically our new public square. And if that's true, then the power to decide what gets seen and what gets taken down,
Well, that's the power to shape the entire public conversation on a scale we've never seen before.
This is where the Twitter files come in. When those internal documents were released, they exposed what some journalists and researchers started calling the censorship industrial complex, revealing this whole new layer to the fight over information.
So what do these files actually show? Well, a whole range of things, from suppressing a huge political story right before an election to direct collaboration between government agencies and platform moderators. All of it had a massive effect on what millions of users saw or didn't see in their feeds.
And this is where it gets really interesting. The documents revealed this documented asymmetry in how moderation rules were sometimes applied. You had insults aimed at one group that were often tolerated, while similar insults aimed at another were treated very differently, which of course raises all sorts of questions about neutrality.
Okay, so finally, part 5. Who decides the truth? When you look at this entire history of incredible triumphs that held power accountable and these damaging failures that eroded trust, it's pretty clear we're at a critical crossroads, not just for journalism, but for all of us.
And look, the stakes are incredibly high. Just look at this contrast. Public trust in the media soared to a peak of 72% after Watergate, and today, it's fallen off a cliff. For a lot of people, the Watchdog has lost the public's confidence.
So that's really the bottom line here. The entire game has shifted under our feet. The classic challenge was uncovering hidden facts. Today, the real battle is over the narrative itself, over who controls the very platforms where we all share and debate information.
And that's what I want to leave you with. In a world where we're just drowning in information, where everyone has access to their own facts and their own sources, maybe the greatest challenge isn't finding the truth anymore. Perhaps the real challenge is figuring out if we can even agree on what it is.